My wife called me dead weight before the dessert even came, and the worst part was how easily the room accepted it. The restaurant was one of those polished places downtown where the lights stay low, the steaks cost more than a week of groceries used to, and every glass on the table catches the candlelight like it belongs in somebody else's life. Madison sat across from me in a red dress I had paid to have tailored 2 months earlier, one hand wrapped around a wine glass, the other resting near Brad Whitmore's wrist like she had forgotten where a wife's loyalty was supposed to sit. There were 6 people at that table. Brad, with his perfect haircut and country club smile. Claire, the family attorney Madison claimed was just an old friend from college. Her sister Ashley, who had been looking at me all night like I had tracked mud onto a white carpet. And 2 of Madison's divorced friends, both of them wearing the kind of satisfied little smiles people wear when they think they are watching a man get what he deserves. I should have known the dinner was a setup the second I walked in and saw the seating chart. My name card was at the far end, away from Madison, next to the kitchen doors where waiters kept brushing past my chair. Brad was beside her. Of course he was. I didn't complain. I took my seat, folded the napkin over my lap, and listened while they talked about beach houses, investment properties, weekend trips to Aspen, and people who had finally leveled up after divorce. Madison laughed louder than everyone else. Every laugh landed a little wrong. Not forced. Not nervous. Comfortable. That was the part that hurt. Then Brad leaned back, looked at my work boots under the table, and asked if I had come straight from a construction site, or if that was just my brand. The table chuckled. Madison didn't stop him. She took a slow sip of wine and said, "Ethan likes simple things." Simple. That word sat on the plate in front of me colder than the butter. I smiled because that is what men like me learn to do when the room wants a reaction. We do not give people easy evidence. We do not raise our voices in restaurants. We breathe through the moment until the moment reveals what it really is. And then it did. Brad said, "Come on, Madison, be honest. You've carried this marriage for years." She looked straight at me, and there was no softness left in her eyes. "Honestly," she said, "he's dead weight. I've carried this marriage, this house, and that man long enough." The table laughed. Even Claire looked down at her glass instead of at me. I heard the waiter set the check on the leather folder beside my hand. Perfect timing. Almost merciful. I opened it, saw the total, for $187 before tip, and something inside me went still. Not numb. Clear. Madison was smiling now, like she had finally said the thing she had been practicing in mirrors and group chats. I slid my card into the folder and handed it to the waiter. "Put everything on mine," I said. Madison blinked. Brad smirked. I signed the receipt slowly, added 20%, because the waiter had done nothing wrong, and stood up. My chair made a small sound against the floor. That tiny scrape cut through the whole table. I looked at my wife and said, "You're right. A man should know when he's no longer wanted in his own house." Her smile widened because she thought I was surrendering. Then I buttoned my jacket and said, "The part you got wrong is whose house it is." And for the first time all night, nobody laughed. The silence followed me all the way to the lobby. It trailed behind my shoes on the marble floor, past the hostess stand, past the coat check, past the wall of framed wine awards Madison used to point at like they meant something. Outside, the Nashville air felt colder than it should have for October. A light mist hung over the street, soft enough to ignore, steady enough to soak through the shoulders of my jacket before I reached the truck. I could see them through the restaurant windows as I crossed the curb. Madison had not moved. Brad was leaning toward her, probably telling her not to worry, probably dressing up shock as confidence. Claire had her phone in her hand, thumb frozen over the screen. That was when I knew for sure. This had never been dinner. Dinner does not need a family attorney sitting 3 chairs away from your wife. Dinner does not need 2 divorced friends watching you like judges at a county fair. Dinner does not need a man like Brad placed beside your wife while you sit near the kitchen doors like extra furniture. I unlocked my Ford, climbed in, and sat there with both hands on the wheel. The cab smelled like sawdust, black coffee, and the leather gloves I kept in the console. Familiar things. Honest things. Things that did not pretend to be better than they were. My phone buzzed before I even started the engine. Madison. I let it ring. Then Brad. I let that one ring too. Then Madison again. The screen lit my face in short, pale flashes. I watched her name appear and disappear until it felt less like a person and more like an alarm I had finally learned not to answer. I had spent 12 years answering. Answering moods. Answering silence. Answering the little tests she pretended were conversations. Do you really have to wear that jacket? Can you not talk about work tonight? Why do you always look so tired? Why can you not be more interesting around my friends? Each question sounded harmless on its own. Together, they built a room I had been shrinking inside for years. I turned the key. The engine came alive with a low, steady rumble, and for the first time that night, something under me felt loyal. I pulled away from the curb and drove toward Franklin, headlights stretching over wet pavement. The restaurant disappeared in the rearview mirror, but Madison's words stayed in the cab with me. Deadweight. I had heard worse words in life. Job sites teach a man patience. So do unpaid invoices, busted pipes at midnight, and banks that smile while they say no. But there is a special kind of cold when the person who knows exactly how much you carried decides to call you heavy. I thought about the first winter in that house. The furnace quit on a Saturday night, and Madison cried in 3 sweaters because the contractor wanted $9,000 we did not have. I fixed it myself with a borrowed manual, 2 trips to Home Depot, and fingers so stiff from the crawl space cold I could barely hold a coffee cup afterward. She called me her hero that night. She made grilled cheese at 1 in the morning, and we ate standing in the kitchen with heat finally pushing through the vents. That memory should have warmed me. It did not. It showed me how long ago she had buried that version of us. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. You embarrassed me. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because the sentence was so perfectly Madison. She had built a table around my humiliation, loaded it with witnesses, seasoned it with contempt, and somehow my leaving had embarrassed her. Another text came in. Come back and talk like an adult. Then another. Brad says you are proving my point. I did not answer. There are moments in a marriage where words only become rope, and the more you speak, the tighter the knot gets around your own throat. I drove with both hands on the wheel and let the highway do the talking. Mile by mile, the city lights thinned. Chain restaurants turned into gas stations. Gas stations turned into dark tree lines and quiet subdivisions where porch lights glowed like small promises. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac with a maple tree in the front yard and stone steps. I had laid myself after work one July, sweating through my shirt while Madison stood on the porch with lemonade and said she could not believe we owned something so beautiful. But that was the trick. She never understood what owning meant. To her, owning was decorating, photographing, hosting, saying my house at brunch until people believed it. To me, owning was the closing table, the trust documents, my father's last envelope, the promise I made over a hospital bed that I would keep the Caldwell home safe from anyone who mistook kindness for weakness. I turned onto our street, and the house came into view through the mist. Warm windows, white trim, the porch swing moving slightly in the wind. From the outside, it still looked like a marriage lived there. I parked in the driveway and sat for one more breath. Then I opened the console, took out the small brass key to my office safe, and closed my hand around it until the teeth pressed into my palm. Madison thought the night had ended at dinner. She had no idea it had. Just started. I stepped out of the truck and the mist touched my face like a warning. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet people pay extra for when they want to pretend life is under control. Sprinklers hissed 2 houses down. A dog barked once behind a fence, then gave up. Our porch light glowed over the stone steps, and for a second I saw my father there instead of the empty doorway. He had stood on that same porch 12 years earlier, thinner than I wanted to admit, one hand on the railing, the other pressed against his side like he was holding himself together by habit. He looked at the frame of the house, the bare dirt yard, the old gutters, the cracked driveway, and said, "A man does not need much, Ethan. Just something worth protecting." Back then, the house was not beautiful. Not yet. It was a tired 2-story colonial with peeling white paint, a roof that needed work, and a backyard full of weeds high enough to hide a lawn chair. Madison had called it charming because she still believed struggle could be romantic if the ending looked good. I called it possible. There is a difference. Possible means work. Possible means late nights with a shop light hanging from a ladder while your wife sleeps upstairs. Possible means learning how to tile a bathroom from a video at 2 in the morning because the contractor's estimate made your stomach drop. Possible means blisters, permits, lumber receipts, and eating peanut butter sandwiches in the garage because every spare dollar is going into drywall. I did not resent it. I loved it. Every nail I drove into that house felt like I was fastening our future to something solid. The first room I finished was the kitchen. Madison wanted white cabinets and brass poles, the kind she saw in magazines at the salon. I worked 3 weekends straight sanding, priming, painting, measuring twice because my father taught me a crooked cabinet tells on a man long after he is gone. When it was done, she walked in barefoot, covered her mouth, and cried. Not the sharp little tears she used later when she wanted a room to bend toward her. Real tears. Soft ones. She touched the counter and whispered, "This finally feels like ours." That sentence used to live in me like a candle. Now it felt like an old photograph left too close to the sun. Faded. Warped. Still recognizable, but no longer trustworthy. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The alarm chirped. The house smelled like vanilla candles and expensive furniture polish. Madison's scent layered over my work like wallpaper over old brick. Her shoes sat by the entryway in a perfect row. Her framed photos lined the console table. Her throw pillow sat on the couch no one was allowed to actually lean against. Everywhere I looked, I saw the life she displayed and the labor she edited out of the picture. The staircase had been my project after our 6th anniversary. The original railing wobbled badly enough to scare me, so I rebuilt it piece by piece, staining the oak in the garage while rain tapped the door. Madison posted a picture when it was finished with the caption, "Finally making this house mine." Mine. I remembered reading that word while standing in the driveway with stain under my fingernails. I told myself she meant ours. Men do that. We translate sharp things into softer language so we can keep peace in the house. We call disrespect stress. We call distance a busy season. We call contempt honesty because the alternative would require us to admit the person we love has started practicing life without us. I walked down the hall toward my office, past the family photos Madison had arranged by color instead of memory. There we were at the Grand Canyon, her smiling in sunglasses, me squinting into the sun after driving 19 hours because she hated flying that year. There we were in Savannah, outside a bed and breakfast I had booked after closing my first 6-figure renovation contract. There we were on this very porch, holding glasses of sweet tea the day the maple tree went in. My father had picked that tree. He said maples had dignity. They changed with the seasons, but did not apologize for standing where they stood. I stopped at the office door and looked back at the house one more time. It was warm, polished, and perfectly staged. But under all that, I could still see the studs, the beams, the patched places. The parts one had carried when nobody clapped. Madison thought the house became valuable when her friends admired it. She never understood it had value before the paint, before the parties, before her name ever touched a Christmas card. I opened my office, switched on the desk lamp, and watched yellow light spill across the safe behind the bookcase. The brass key was still in my hand. My father's voice came back, quiet as dust. Something worth protecting. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The safe opened with a soft metal click, and for a moment I just stared at the folders inside. Most men keep cash, passports, maybe a few old watches behind a lock like that. I kept paper. Paper does not look powerful until the wrong person underestimates it. Deeds, trust certificates, insurance records, tax statements. A post-nuptial agreement Madison had signed 4 years earlier on a bright Tuesday afternoon when she was too distracted by a lunch reservation to read past the first page. I remembered that day clearly because I had asked her twice if she wanted her own attorney to review it. She waved me off both times. "Ethan, I trust you," she said, already checking her phone. Back then, those words made me feel honored. Now they sat in my memory like a locked door with the key still in it. The agreement had not been a trick. It came after I used part of my father's estate to clear a business debt Madison never liked mentioning. She had tried launching a home staging company with 2 friends from her networking group, and within 18 months, the company was bleeding money. Storage units full of rented furniture. Credit cards with balances she called temporary. A supplier threatening collections. She came to me at the kitchen island with red eyes, not because she was sorry, but because she was scared the wrong people would find out. I paid it. All of it. Not because I was weak. Because I thought saving her from public shame was part of being a husband. My attorney, Mr. Callahan, advised one condition. Protect the house. Protect the trust. Protect what your father left you. Madison signed the papers with a latte in one hand and a gold pen in the other. She kissed. my cheek afterward and said, "See? We handle things like adults." Adults. That word came back to me as I lifted the blue folder from the safe. The cover was worn at the edges from years of being opened, checked, and put away. Caldwell Family Residence Trust. My father's last act of stubborn wisdom. He had seen things in people I was too loyal to see. Not because he disliked Madison. He barely had the strength to dislike anyone by then. But he understood pride. He understood houses. He understood how love can make a man leave gates unlocked in a world that still has thieves. I set the folder on my desk and opened it under the lamp. The pages glowed cream against the dark wood. Trustee. Separate property. Premarital inheritance. Exclusion from marital estate. Words dry enough to put a room to sleep. Unless that room was a courtroom. Unless the woman who had just called you worthless thought the roof over her head belonged to her because she chose the curtains. My phone buzzed again. Madison. Then a text. "We are leaving now. You had better be ready to apologize." I looked at the message until the screen dimmed. Then another one appeared. "Do not make me look stupid in front of everyone." That one almost made me smile. Not a happy smile. The kind a man makes when the last missing piece finally clicks into place. This was never about pain to her. It was about presentation. Even now, driving home from a table where she had stripped me down for entertainment, her real concern was the audience. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the small notebook where I kept household records. Alarm company. Garage access. Smart lock administrator code. Security camera login. Madison hated that I wrote things down. She called it old man behavior, even though I was 42. But old man behavior has a way of saving you when fashionable people forget passwords. I called Callahan first. It was late, but he answered on the third ring, his voice rough with sleep and experience. I told him only the facts. Dinner. Witnesses. The statement. The attorney at the table. The likelihood that Madison was coming home with Brad. No emotion. No adjectives. Just facts. When I finished, Callahan exhaled once. "Do not argue with her," he said. "Do not block her from retrieving personal belongings. Do not threaten. Do not perform. Secure your separate property. Document everything. And I will file the formal notice first thing in the morning." That was Callahan. Calm as a courthouse clock. I asked about the house. He said what he had said for years. "The trust owns it. You control the trust. She knows what she signed, whether she remembers reading it or not." After we hung up, the room felt sharper, as if the air had edges. I logged into the security system and changed the garage code. Then the front lock. Then the guest access pin Madison had given Brad without telling me. The one I found 3 months earlier and pretended not to notice. I did not touch her clothes. I did not throw anything out. I did not need drama. Drama was her language, not mine. I printed 3 copies of the trust summary, the post-nuptial agreement, and Callahan's emergency instruction letter. Each page slid from the printer with a soft mechanical whisper. The house around me was still. Too still. Like it was holding its breath. I placed 1 copy in a manila envelope and wrote Madison's name across the front. My hand did not shake. That surprised me. Then headlights swept across the office wall. 2 sets. 1 car turning into the driveway, another stopping at the curb. Madison had brought an audience home. Of course she had. I closed the blue folder, stood up, and picked up the envelope. Somewhere near the front door, the garage keypad beeped once. Then again. Then a third time. Wrong code. The night finally knocked back. The third wrong beep sounded through the foyer like a tiny confession. Then came Madison's voice from outside, muffled by the glass, but sharp enough to cut through the front hall. "Ethan, open the door." No please. No apology. Just command. I stood in the entryway with the manila envelope in my left hand and the porch light spilling over her face through the sidelights. She had changed nothing since dinner. Same red dress. Same diamond earrings. Same expression she wore when a waiter brought the wrong wine. Behind her, Brad stood near the steps with his hands in his coat pockets, trying to look casual and important at the same time. Ashley was by Madison's car, arms folded. One of the divorced friends sat in the passenger seat with her phone angled just a little too high, like she wanted to record without admitting it. Claire was not with them. That mattered. A smart attorney knows when to stop being part of a scene. Madison jabbed the keypad again. Wrong code. The lock stayed quiet. She looked through the glass and saw me. For half a second, relief crossed her face. Then she remembered the audience and turned it into anger. "This is childish," she said. Unlock the door. I opened it only as far as the security chain allowed. The small strip of space between us felt wider than the driveway. Cold air slid inside, carrying the smell of wet leaves and expensive perfume. Madison looked at the chain, then at me, and her eyes narrowed. Take that off. I kept my voice even. Brad is not coming inside. Brad gave a short laugh from the porch steps. Man, do not make this weird. I looked past Madison at him. You have a guest code because my wife gave you one. That code no longer works. That is not weird. That is accurate. His smile thinned. Madison's cheeks changed color, just enough to tell me the truth had landed. Ashley shifted her weight by the car. The phone in the passenger seat lowered an inch. Good. Facts have a way of ruining performances. Madison leaned closer to the gap in the door. You are embarrassing yourself. There it was again. Embarrassment. Her favorite measuring stick. Not right. Not wrong. Not cruel. Not kind. Only how it looked. I slid the envelope through the opening. She did not take it at first. She stared at it like it was beneath her. What is that? She asked. Copies, I said. The trust summary, the post-nuptial agreement, and Mr. Callahan's instructions for tomorrow morning. Brad stepped up one stair. You brought paperwork to a marriage fight. I looked at him for the first time the way I should have looked at him months ago, not as a rival, not as a threat, but as a man who had mistaken access for importance. This is not a marriage fight, I said. This is a property boundary. The porch went quiet except for the soft ticking of rain on the gutters. Madison snatched the envelope and tore it open with the kind of confidence people have right before paper teaches them humility. She pulled out the first page. Her eyes moved quickly, then slowed. That was the moment. Not the shouting. Not the insults. The slowing. The human brain can run from a lot of things, but legal language has a heavy step. It catches up. Her mouth opened, then closed. She flipped to the next page. Brad leaned over her shoulder, but she turned slightly away from him. Pride is strange. It wants witnesses for victory and privacy for defeat. This does not mean what you think it means, she said, but her voice had lost its polish. I did not answer right away. I let the porch light hold her there. The same light I had installed after she complained the entry looked too dark in photos. The same door I had sanded and repainted twice because she wanted a softer black. The same threshold she had stepped across for years while calling this place hers to people who never asked who paid the closing costs, who repaired the joists, who stayed up when the basement flooded, who signed the papers before there was anything pretty enough to post. It means exactly what it says, I said. The Caldwell family residence trust owns this house. I control the trust. Your personal belongings are safe. You can arrange a time with Callahan tomorrow to retrieve whatever is yours. Tonight, you can stay in the guest suite if you come in alone and keep this civil, or you can leave and have your attorney contact mine. Madison looked up fast. You cannot put me out of my own home. The words sounded rehearsed, but the fear underneath them did not. I shook my head once. I am not putting you out of your home. I am reminding you this never was. Brad muttered something under his breath. Madison turned on him, just a flash of panic breaking through the anger, as if she had expected him to have a line ready, a rescue, a clever answer. He had none. Men like Brad are loud in restaurants and quiet around documents. The friend in the car stopped recording. Ashley looked down at the driveway. For the first time all night, Madison had no table, no laughter, no audience willing to clap on cue. Just whetstone steps, a locked door, and the truth in her hands. I started to close the door, slowly, not to punish her, but to end the performance. Before it clicked shut, Madison whispered my name. Not Ethan the burden. Not Ethan the joke. Just Ethan. Small. Barely there. I paused. Her eyes had changed, but not enough. Regret is not the same as respect. I looked at the envelope, then at the woman holding it, and said, You should have read what you signed. Then I closed the door, slid the chain free, and locked it fully from the inside. For several seconds after the lock clicked, nothing happened. No pounding. No shouting loud enough to wake the neighbors. Just a silence, so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the faint rain brushing the front windows. Then Madison tried the door handle once. Slowly, like maybe the lock would remember her. It did not. I stood on the other side with my palm resting against the wood, not pushing, not trembling, just feeling the barrier I should have built years ago. Outside, her voice came softer. Ethan, open the door. Let us talk. Us. That little word tried to sneak through the cracks like smoke. It had worked before. Us had made me apologize for things I did not do. Us had made me stay at parties where I was treated like a prop. Us had made me repair what she broke because marriage was supposed to mean two people carrying the load. But tonight, Us was standing on the porch with Brad Whitmore behind it, an illegal envelope in its hands. I stepped away from the door. My phone buzzed on the entry table. Madison again. I let it ring. A second later, a text appeared. You are overreacting. Then another. You are twisting my words. Then, almost immediately, you know I did not mean it like that. I looked at those messages and felt the old reflex reach for me. Explain. Smooth it over. Be reasonable. Be the man who absorbs the hit so everyone else can sleep. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I thought about that table. The laughter. Claire looking down. Brad smiling. Madison saying the words as if she had finally taken off a tight pair of shoes. Comfortable. Relieved. Honest. I set the phone face down. Outside, Brad said something too low for the camera to catch, and Madison snapped at him, sharper than I expected. The porch camera showed them in black and white on my hallway tablet, two polished people looking smaller without the restaurant lights. Brad kept glancing toward the street. He did not like being visible in a suburban cul-de-sac at 11:30 at night beside another man's locked front door. Men like him enjoy the thrill of crossing lines. They rarely enjoy standing on the line when consequences arrive. Madison turned away from him and read the papers again under the porch light. Her shoulders changed as she moved from page to page. At first, they were squared with anger, then stiff with disbelief, then lower. Not collapsed, not broken, just lowered enough to tell me the story in her head was losing its structure. I walked back to my office and sat at the desk. The blue folder was still open beneath the lamp. Beside it lay an old photograph my father kept tucked inside the trust documents. Him and me in the front yard before the renovations, both of us in faded jeans, standing in front of that ugly old porch with grins too tired to fake. He had written on the back, "Foundation before finish." I had not understood how much life was in those 3 words. People admire finish. Paint colors, granite counters, perfect dinner photos, a wife laughing in a red dress under low lights. But foundation is what holds when the finish starts lying. My phone buzzed again, this time with Ashley's name. I almost ignored it, then answered because Ashley usually spoke only when Madison's version needed reinforcement. Her voice came small. "Ethan, I am taking her to my place." I said, "That is probably best." She paused. I could hear rain, a car door, Madison talking in the background with the sharp panic of someone trying to control a room that no longer existed. Ashley lowered her voice. "I did not know about the papers." I believed that. Ashley liked judgment, but she was not stupid enough to stand beside a trap once she saw the teeth. "I did not know Claire was coming as a lawyer either," she added. That sentence sat me upright. "What do you mean?" Ashley went quiet for a breath too long. Then she said, "Madison told us tonight was supposed to make you leave first. She said if you walked out, it would help later." Claire told her not to do anything dramatic, but Brad kept pushing. The room narrowed around the desk lamp. Not from shock. Confirmation has a different weight than surprise. It does not burst through the door. It sits down across from you and says, "You knew." I thanked Ashley and ended the call. Outside, engines started. One car pulled away, then another. Through the front window, I watched Madison climb into Ashley's passenger seat with the envelope pressed against her chest. Brad remained by the curb for a few seconds, useless under the streetlight, then got into his own car and left in the opposite direction. That told me enough. I locked the deadbolt, turned off the porch camera display, and walked into the kitchen. The house was still warm, still standing, still mine to protect. I poured a glass of water, but before I could drink it, my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice said, "Mr. Caldwell, this is Claire Bennett. You need to know what your wife planned before tomorrow morning." Claire's voice did not sound like the woman from dinner. At the restaurant, she had been composed, polished, nearly invisible behind her wine glass. On the phone, she sounded like someone standing too close to a fire she had warned others not to light. "Before I say anything," she said, "I want to be clear. I am not your attorney. I am not giving you legal advice. But I am also not going to let Madison turn a bad marriage into a false story if I can prevent it." I set the glass of water on the counter without taking a sip. The kitchen clock read 11:48. The house around me was dark except for the under-cabinet lights Madison liked, because they made the marble look expensive. I had installed those lights myself one Sunday after church, while she complained the old ones made the kitchen look cheap in photographs. "I am listening," I said. Claire exhaled. "Madison came to me 6 weeks ago asking general questions about divorce. At first, it was ordinary. Assets, accounts, the house, standard things. I told her the trust would be an obstacle if the documents were valid, and from what little she showed me, they appeared valid. She did not like that answer. That sounded like Madison. She did not hate facts until they refused to serve her." Claire continued, quieter now. "Then Brad got involved. He convinced her the trust would not matter if she could make you look unstable, controlling, or like you abandoned the home. He kept saying judges hate men who walk out and lock their wives out. I told them that was not how it worked, and I told Madison not to stage anything." My hand tightened around the edge of the counter. Not enough to shake. Just enough to remind me I was still made of bone and nerves, not steel. "Tonight was staged," I said. Claire did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. "The dinner was supposed to provoke you," she said. "Brad thought if they humiliated you publicly, you would lose your temper or leave in a way they could spin. Madison wanted witnesses. I told her I would not participate in anything dishonest, which is why I left before they drove to the house." I looked toward the foyer, where the envelope had passed through the door less than an hour earlier. The whole night rearranged itself in my mind. The seating chart, the jokes, Brad pushing at the same sore place again and again. Madison waiting for the sentence that would make me break character. They had not wanted truth. They wanted footage. They wanted a story neat enough to hand a lawyer and ugly enough to hand friends at brunch. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Claire's voice softened, but not with pity. Pity would have insulted me. This sounded more like professional disgust. "Because she crossed a line. Because you were calm when most people would not have been. And because Brad is not as loyal to her as she thinks." That last sentence landed differently. "What does that mean?" "After you left," Madison panicked. "Brad told her to go home and force a scene. He said if you refused to let her in, she could claim you threw her out. When she asked if he would stay with her afterward, he laughed it off. I do not think she noticed. I did. I closed my eyes for 1 second. In the darkness behind my lids, I saw Madison at the table, smiling like she had upgraded her life. Brad beside her, already calculating the exit. Some people do not steal your place because they want to live there. They just want to prove they can open the door. Claire gave me dates. Calls. A coffee shop meeting off West End Avenue. A message Madison sent about making me show my real face. Claire said she would write a statement if subpoenaed, but she recommended I let Callahan handle everything cleanly. No confrontation. No late-night messages. No emotional replies that could be twisted into a weapon. "You have cameras?" she asked. "Front porch and driveway," I said. "Save the footage." Already doing it. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen with the phone in my hand and felt the anger arrive late. It did not roar. It settled, heavy and cold. The kind of anger that does not want to smash anything because it finally understands everything. Madison had not insulted me by accident. She had built a stage, invited an audience, and handed me a script where I played the unstable husband. My only crime was refusing the role. I walked back to the office, saved the porch footage, backed up the texts, and forwarded everything to Callahan with a subject line that read, "For morning filing." Then I opened the drawer beneath the safe and took out my father's old measuring tape. The yellow case was scratched, the numbers faded from years of use. He used to say, "Measure twice, son, especially when your heart is involved." I set it beside the blue folder and finally understood. Love had made me generous. It had not made me blind. Not anymore. Morning came in pieces. First the gray light over the maple tree, then the coffee maker clicking on by habit, then the sound of my own phone vibrating across the kitchen island like the day had already started without asking permission. I had slept maybe 90 minutes in the leather chair in my office, shoes still on, blue folder on the desk, my father's measuring tape beside it like a small yellow reminder that a man should check the truth before he cuts. At 6:12, Callahan called. His voice was already dressed for court. "I have reviewed everything," he said. "The trust is solid, the post-nuptial agreement is clean, and the footage helps. Do not engage with Madison directly today. I am filing notice and sending formal communication by noon." I looked across the kitchen at the marble counters Madison had once called non-negotiable. What about her belongings? I asked. Document them. Do not pack anything intimate or private yourself. Let a third-party inventory. Offer a reasonable time for collection. Keep it boring. Keep it boring. That was good advice. Boring is hard to twist. I hired a bonded inventory service by 7:15 and called a locksmith by 7:30, not because Madison had no rights to retrieve her things, but because Brad had no right to access anything my father left behind. By 8, the house had changed without moving. The locks looked the same, the windows looked the same, the porch swing still tapped lightly in the breeze, but the air inside felt different. Cleaner. Not happy. Not yet. Just honest. At 8:40, Ashley pulled into the driveway with Madison in the passenger seat. No Brad. That absence said more than any apology could have. Madison stepped out wearing yesterday's coat over clothes she must have borrowed from her sister. Her hair was tied back, her face pale in the flat morning light. Without the restaurant glow, without the red dress, without the laughter around her, she looked less like a woman who had outgrown me and more like someone who had spent the night reading the fine print of her own confidence. I opened the door before she knocked. Callahan was on speaker from my phone, silent but present. The inventory woman stood behind me with a clipboard. Madison noticed both and stopped on the top step. Really? She said. You brought witnesses? I kept my voice low. I learned from dinner. Her mouth tightened. Ashley looked down at the porch boards. Madison stepped inside alone, and for the first time in years, she looked around the foyer like a guest. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because the house remembered us better than she did. The hooks by the door where her scarves hung. The bench where she used to sit while I tied muddy boots before going back out to fix something. The framed photo from Savannah still on the console, smiling proof that people can stand close together and still drift miles apart. Madison walked into the living room and saw 3 labeled boxes near the wall. Personal documents. Clothing to be inventoried. Items requiring confirmation. Nothing thrown. Nothing damaged. Nothing cruel. She stared at the labels as if she had been denied the scene she came prepared to accuse me of. You planned this, she said. No, I answered. You planned last night. I prepared for this morning. Her eyes flashed, then softened too quickly. Ethan, I was angry. I said things. Brad pushed it. You know how he is. There it was. The first sacrifice. Brad, the polished escape hatch. The man who had been useful until he became evidence. I did not take the bait. Brad did not make you invite a lawyer. Brad did not make you seat me at the end of the table. Brad did not make you say what you said. Madison swallowed. For a second, I saw the woman in the unfinished kitchen, crying over white cabinets and brass poles, whispering that the place felt like ours. Then the second passed, and the woman in front of me looked at the marble, the staircase, the framed pictures, measuring what she could still claim. I have lived here for 12 years, she said. I decorated every room. Callahan's voice came through the phone, calm and precise. Mrs. Caldwell, all future property discussions should go through counsel. Madison flinched at the formality. Mrs. Caldwell sounded colder than Madison. Cleaner, too. She turned toward the stairs, then stopped at the first step. Her hand touched the railing I had rebuilt after our 6th anniversary. I did love this house, she said quietly. I believed her. That was the saddest part. She loved the finish. The photographs. The praise. The way people said, Madison, your home is stunning. But love that only recognizes shine will always mistake foundation for dead weight. I stepped aside so she could go upstairs with the inventory woman. As she passed me, she whispered, Do you hate me? I looked at the maple tree through the open doorway, its leaves turning gold in the Tennessee morning. No, I said. I just finally believe you. By 10:30, the boxes were lined neatly in the foyer, and the house looked like it had been holding its breath for years and had finally exhaled. Madison came down the stairs last, one hand sliding along the railing as if touch could make a thing belong to her again. The inventory woman followed with her clipboard. Ashley stood near the door, quiet, holding Madison's purse like a sister who had run out of speeches. Nobody yelled. Nobody performed. That was the strange mercy of the morning. Without Brad, without wine glasses, without a table full of people waiting to laugh, Madison had to stand inside the truth without decorations. She paused at the bottom step and looked into the living room. Sunlight had reached the hardwood now, showing every grain, every small scratch, every place a chair had sat for too long. "I remember when you refinished these floors," she said. Her voice was low, almost careful. "You stayed up until 3 in the morning because my parents were coming that weekend." I remembered too. I remembered the rented sander, the dust in my hair, the ache in my shoulders, and Madison walking through the finished room barefoot, smiling like a woman who still knew how to be grateful. "Your mother said they looked professional," I said. Madison nodded once. They did. For a moment, the years folded in on themselves. The kitchen after the furnace came back on. The porch the day the maple tree was planted. Her laughter before it learned how to cut. My patience before it became permission. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down, and whatever softness had been gathering in her face disappeared. Not anger this time. Humiliation. I did not ask, but Ashley saw the screen and looked away. Madison turned the phone slightly, just enough for me to see Brad's name above a message that said he needed space and did not want to be involved in legal drama. 6 words would have been enough. He used more because cowards often do. Madison stared at the message like she was watching a door close from the wrong side. I felt no victory in it. That surprised me. I had imagined, in the darker corners of my mind, that there would be some sweetness when the people who mocked me finally had to taste their own words. There was not. There was only clarity. Brad had not taken anything from me that Madison had not already unlocked. He was not the disease. He was the symptom wearing cologne. Callahan called just before noon. His notice had been filed. Formal communication had gone out. Separate property was documented. Temporary arrangements would be handled through counsel. Clean. Precise. Boring. Exactly the way he promised. Madison listened from across the foyer, holding the strap of her purse with both hands. When I ended the call, she asked, "Is this really how it ends?" I looked around the house before I answered. The staircase. The kitchen lights. The front door. The maple tree turning gold beyond the window. "No," I said. "This is how pretending ends." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry in the way that used to pull me across a room. Maybe she knew it would not work. Maybe she was tired. Maybe, for the first time in years, she understood that regret arriving after consequences is not the same as love arriving on time. Ashley carried the first box out. The inventory woman followed with 2 garment bags. Madison stayed at the threshold, half inside, half outside, exactly where the night had left us. She looked at me once more. "I should not have said it," she whispered. I nodded. "No, you should not have believed it." That landed harder than I expected. On her. On me. On the house. She stepped onto the porch, and I did not close the door right away. I watched Ashley load the car. I watched Madison stand under the porch light I had installed for her photographs. I watched the woman who once called this place ours leave with everything that was hers and nothing that was not. When the car pulled away, the cul-de-sac returned to its quiet shape. No audience. No laughter. No applause. Just wet pavement drying under a Tennessee sun and a maple tree dropping 1 gold leaf onto the steps. I picked it up and sat on the porch, swing with my coffee cooling beside me. My father's house was still standing. So was I? She had mistaken silence for weakness, patience for emptiness, and foundation for weight. By sunrise, I understood the truth she never could. I had not been holding her back. I had been holding the whole thing up.